Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Brief. Today, we are so incredibly lucky to have Alexis Crowell here. Alexis, welcome. Really appreciate you making the
Thank you.
time to meet with us.
Happy to be here, Chris. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Awesome. So, Alexis is the global CMO of the Americas from Alexera AI. Did I get that right?
Global CMO, and then I'm president of the Americas for Axelera. Yeah, it's
Accelera.
okay. Everybody
My word.
seems to get Axelera wrong. It's all good.
My word. Well, Alexis, tell us, start off by giving us a background on, like, you've got such an interesting career. You've been all over the world. You continue to chase your tail around the world. Um, you know, tell us, let's start off actually back at your university days and tell us what your journeys look like leading up to today.
Sure. And maybe if you will indulge me for just a second, I'll start slightly before that. I grew up in a family where we moved pretty frequently. My dad was absolutely outstanding at his job. My mom is an amazing human, and they partnered together, and we just kind of moved where his career went. And that gave me this, I guess, desire to always see something new. Candidly, it also built a lot of resiliency, right? Because when you move when you're young, you get to figure out who you are pretty quickly. And that's really like if I look forward into, how I ended up both at Intel and then what happened after that, that's kind of been the foundation
Yeah.
really of who I am and why I do what I do. Um, so I wound up at a school called Ohio Northern University, which the reason behind it is I wanted small, right? Ohio is in this tiny town called Ada. We used to joke that the population of the school was as big as the population of the town, and it was as big as its name, 3 letters. That was it, right? Only thing this school is known for the town is the school and the Wilson Football Factory. So we had a claim
Yeah.
to fame, but that was really it. But I loved it. I got to play golf there. I had an absolutely incredible time. It's everything that you would hope a university experience would be. Um, but when I got done, I wasn't quite ready to just immediately jump into the working world. And I knew, because I know my nature, that if I didn't go get my MBA as quickly as I could, the likelihood is I wasn't going to want to take a break and go do it later in life. So I got really intrigued by the University of Pittsburgh because they had this dual program. They had a Master's of International Business, the MIB. So I'm like, ooh, I get to be a Men in Black. But then also my MBA. Um, and it was amazing because, part of the entire program was I actually went and did these assignments with the central bank in Mexico and in Chile and had some really intriguing opportunities through that whole thing. So really enjoyed my time at Cats. But what was funny is I did my internship at Intel while I was there, and they offered me a job on my last day. And I said, well, I've got these 2 degrees coming, right? These 2 masters. Does it change anything if does it change my starting salary? What does it change if I do both of them versus I drop the second degree and I just do my MBA and I start work early? And they're like, yeah, it really doesn't change anything. It's your MBA that we're most interested in. I'm like, okay, done. So I
Right.
I switched onto a single degree and started working for Intel. And then from there, I was so fortunate to work for some of the smartest people on the planet. I did 7 international assignments. I started in finance. Pretty quickly learned that was not the career choice I thought it was gonna be.
Right.
Was able to do some time in operations, got to learn really how the supply chain worked, how we did material handling, things along those lines inside of Intel, and then had a manager who put a lot of faith in me and let me run some engineering teams on the software side. And what was amazing about that is I got to learn how to fuse the business knowledge, which is where I'm good, with the engineering knowledge, which is not where I was good at the time. But it made a really solid team because my expertise plus their expertise created really interesting outcomes. So that kind of led me through until I found my way into the sales and marketing team. I ran AI product marketing for a while, went over and worked on the Microsoft account for a while. And then in my last assignment, found myself as the CTO for Asia Pacific and Japan. where I was responsible for everything outside of China, but really around the solutions, right? How are we helping companies build AI? How are they thinking about business problems? Right. One of the things with AI is people like to talk about speeds and feeds,
Mm,
meaning how fast is the technology, which technology, and we were working really hard to help them turn that conversation on its head, because at the end of the day, AI is just a tool, and
yeah,
that tool needs to be used to solve a problem. So if you could start with the problem statement, then it became much easier to back into, okay, well, this is the type of technology you need. So anyhow, long-winded answer. Through that whole process, I got to know a gentleman named Jonathan Ballin. He was at Intel at the time, um, and then he became chairman of the board of Axelera, and he gave me a call at one point and said, "We're looking for a CMO. Do you know anyone?" And the timing and the opportunity was just too perfect to pass up.
that's
So I
good.
joined Axelera about a year and a half ago and couldn't be happier.
I love it. So you dropped in rather casually that you played golf in college. So
I did. Yeah.
and when you travel, do you still play golf and do you have like a travel bag and is it still part of your life and lifestyle?
Oh, I wish I could say it was, Chris. I played quite a bit when I was in Asia.
Yeah.
In fact, I loved that part of the culture, but no, I really haven't played that much recently. I'd love to, though. I always look for an opportunity. I do have a travel bag. Although admittedly, typically I just travel with my carry-on because I'm in and out so quickly.
Yeah.
But hey, open invitation. If someone would like to play and you need somebody to come join you, I would be happy to.
Yeah, like you, I played golf. I didn't play in college, but I thought I might try to, and found myself coming to the realization that my aspirations and my ability to get a scorecard that looked good enough was different than what the actual players on actual contest day. It's a whole different game when you're in the heat of it. But I admire people that are able to do that, and it's a good and it's interesting because one of the things I actually use in an interview process for staff and people I've worked with over the years is if you played sports and
Mm.
how did the sport that you played and the role that you played on the team or whatever it might be affect the way you think and do what you do? So I'll ask you that question. Are there lessons from golf and the way that you attacked the game, when you're playing competitively that apply to your approach to work?
Oh, that's a really good question, Chris. So I grew up playing sports. I played everything: soccer, volleyball, basketball, tennis. Um, I think the biggest thing is you've got to learn to get over a shot really quickly,
Yeah,
right? Because as I'm sure you've experienced, we all have bad ones, right? And it's really a matter of how do you then just figure out how to keep going, right? If you dwell on that bad shot, you get stuck. And then all of
yeah,
a sudden you have 5 bad shots that come after that.
right.
So I think being able to be resilient, learn from it, right? Like, okay, I didn't keep my shoulders in the swing, or maybe I tried to watch the ball before it actually took off. You got to learn from those moments, but if you don't move on, your entire game can get destroyed. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I
Yeah,
that I took away from it.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, good friend of mine said the part of the game you need to work on most is recovery. Because
That's
you're
right.
always going to face the need to recover, and true in business as well, right? There's always a curveball that you don't anticipate. So now jumping into your Intel experience, I mean, Intel. It's interesting how as a company people know it but don't know it. I mean,
Hmm.
it's Intel Inside, one of the great campaigns of all time, certainly. And during my journey, I worked on the HP business globally and partnered with Intel and Microsoft. And so I had three masters to serve in the agency world. We had three clients that all wanted their own thing. Intel actually was the easiest to work with in most respects because we had to just put the logo, have the, the audio sound to go with it if it was a broadcast asset, etc. And it was a very straightforward program. But tell us, in the Intel world, how did you go from finance to, kind of the journey there? Because and what was it, the leadership that helped you along with your own kind of drive? But it's really interesting to me, being CTO in Asia, and I have to ask you, how many languages do you speak? Because I would imagine in some regard there's been some need to at least have some base level ability in the international markets.
I speak 3, but sadly, no Asian languages. So I speak, Spanish and sign language, American Sign Language. I can say thank you in almost all Asian languages, and I used to be able to, I think, ask for a beer in most
Yeah,
languages, but
right, right.
that's about it. Um, to answer your question, one of the things that what I was really fortunate with, and Intel, I think, was really good at this at the time, was if someone was willing to work really hard and they had a solid track record, there was, willingness to test you in other places. And if you built the right relationships and the right rapport with people where they'd seen you in action, right? They knew that you were going to do everything in your power to make it successful, but they also knew that you would ask for help if you got stuck,
Mm,
right? Because you kind of needed those both things. Then you had this amazing opportunity to, in my case, see the world, but also see the entire side of the business. I mean, I was part of every part of Intel outside of physically being in the fab.
mm,
Um, and it absolutely, to your point, there was some amazing leaders that I am so grateful for, that took a shot on me. I think I lived up hopefully I lived up to their expectations, but they were willing to take a shot because I had a track record of just kinda putting my head down and figuring things out with the help of those around me. So that was a big part of it, and I was, again, I think, success is, there's a great deal of luck that goes
yeah.
into that too. And when I joined, I got, the way the finance program worked was they hired very, very smart people, and then depending upon your start date, then they slotted you into different finance roles around the company.
Mm,
And when I started, I started in the software group. So I started on the side of the business that I lovingly call the redheaded stepchild, right? I mean, that was not something everybody understood at the time because we're talking like way early 2000s.
mm,
And not everyone inside of Intel understood the value of software at the time. And that gave me a very different perspective that's really shaped the rest of my career. In fact, it was one of the big questions that I asked when I was talking to the Axelera crew was, what's your software stack? Because silicon without software is literally just a paperweight.
right,
A beautiful paperweight, but it's a paperweight. It doesn't work.
right.
And I credit that I was lucky enough to be placed in that software team, 20 plus years ago to really understand that value and that co-design requirement necessary to really be successful.
That's great. But, I've never been a fan of matrix management experience pathways
Mm.
generally because I feel like it 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 pushes you towards the mean as opposed to finding your, true brilliance point. But it sounds like what you benefited from was the ability to play a specific role, but influence other things because the more broadly your knowledge experience, as you built your kind of base, you were able to apply it much more effectively in all the things you were working on. Is that an accurate kind of way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think so. It was certainly a big part of the conversation when I joined Accelera because, when you're joining a smaller company, you never just play in your one lane, right?
Right,
Our goal is to hire brilliant people, and Fabrizio, our CEO, has done that. But your goal is to hire brilliant people that have seen more. And can help across the entire team because none of us wear just a single hat, right?
right, right.
Yeah, absolutely. I would credit that to being a big part of my success story, candidly, because I can think about things differently, right?
Mm,
I can see a bigger picture and we used to call it seeing around the corner. And the only reason I could see somewhat around the corner is because I understood how all of the pieces fit together.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So Intel, there's all kinds. I mean, Intel was an established company, massive global, lots of areas for you to learn and grow. What was it that when you got that call from your colleague, your former colleague, at Axelera, uh, what was the appeal? What was the ask? And how has it evolved since you've been there?
Um, yeah, that's a really good question. So the appeal was a couple of things. While I was at this, 110,000 person company, I was always kind of in the fringes, meaning I didn't really focus on, Xeon or Core in terms of like the mothership, right?
Right.
I was on the software side or I was out in the field, right? 7 different international assignments. So I had this run of realizing I really liked to see a lot of what was going on at once. Um, when I was in Singapore, which was that last assignment, I also had the privilege of kind of running the site, which I mean didn't mean much because I was under the mothership, but I got to talk to everyone and help kind of across a number of different functions. And those were the pieces that I loved, right? I loved being able to see all of it and being able to leverage all of that varied experience to help in areas that maybe wasn't my direct purview. But someone would come and ask for advice, right? So that was really intriguing to me with Accelera was because I could be in the main part of the company, right? Focused on our core product, our core expertise, but still have purview and understand what's going on across all of it. Because candidly, I think I would get really, really bored if I stayed in one narrow slice. That's
Yeah.
just not my personality. Um, so it's been great. I mean, since I joined, about 6 months after I joined, I took on the GM of the Americas role as well. So now, I get to do things like finding our office location in the States, in addition to, okay, what's our major global campaign that we're about to go run?
Right.
And that to me is just fun and it keeps it intriguing and it means no 2 days are the same.
Right. So, you it sounds like at the core, you're a builder of
Yeah.
businesses, right? And we share that DNA and I think the same way in that understanding how an organization makes money, right? And then who cares on the outside? What are you solving for?
Right.
Like, right? Because there's so many especially in the marketing realm that they're so busy telling people what to think, they never they fail to stop to actually listen to what the audience is telling them. But it sounds like,
Mhm.
and I imagine, like you, I've worked internationally a ton and most of my career globally, and we continue to today. The lessons you learn that are not even verbal in many cases, and that are cultural, that are around the buyer and the buying committee. Talk a little bit about that, especially as you're in an industry. You're what you guys do is very unique and very specialized. So talk a little bit about how that fits, how you think about the buying committee, think about the marketplace, and then make sure the organization is rising to the occasion as the market starts to mature in a whole new way.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to always remember, Chris, is that nobody cares about us, right?
Right.
And I say that lovingly, right? But especially in tech, when you build something as novel and as innovative, and I mean, we build the most efficient inference chip on the planet right now, right? It's really easy to get a little bit egotistical about that or have a little bit too much hubris around how good that is.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, no one cares unless they understand how you're solving their problem. And being able to answer that question first
Yeah.
is absolutely core to being successful, in my opinion, irrespective of what company you're at. And I think there's a lot of companies that have forgotten that. Right? They've forgotten that at the end of the day, you're marketing and you're selling to humans.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if you're in a business to business world, it's still businesses, but people make the decision. And by nature, we are inherently selfish beings, right?
Yeah.
And I don't say that as a bad thing,
Yeah.
right? We're just very focused on what are my KPIs? How do I be successful? How am I moving things to the next level? And the reality is when you're in my shoes, if you're the vendor or you're an ingredient player, which is really what we are, right? We
Yep.
we're part of a big compute ecosystem. It's not about me.
Yeah.
It's not about Axelera. It's not about my product. It's about how does 1 + 1 = 3, and how does that other one really get to experience something that's going to solve their problems. It's going to fix their KPIs. And once you focus there, then everything else becomes easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way you think about that. When I worked on HP Personal Systems Group, which was the enterprise level, focused, hardware side of the business, um, we spent a lot of time honoring the intelligence of the buyer and the IT, kind of infrastructure, and really like acknowledging their intelligence, their integrity, the complexity of their problems, the way that, when the phone rings or they get an email or, whatever notification system, that it's rarely great job, love you guys. Right. It's crap's broken, like, what are you doing? When is this going to be back? I don't have oxygen today. Um, and so the I love the way you express that, right? And especially as we look, I mean, technology and ingredients, you have to play nice with others. You have to tie things together in a way that you become the de facto without that arrogance.
Hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about that. Like, from a marketing perspective, what are some of the things and places and spaces that you go to understand what to say, how to say, and then how do you arm the team internally and externally through communications to do that?
I had a leader at Intel who used to say, God gave us 2 ears and one mouth for a reason.
Mhm.
So, very first thing is I try and spend as much time with our customers as I can listening, understanding what those pain points are, understanding how they're measuring their own business.
Yeah.
What are their goals? That's a big one, right? Not a lot of people always ask, okay, well, where are you trying to take your business over the next 12 to 24 months? And once you understand those, 2 to 3 things,
Yeah.
then you can start to map together what does partnership look like? Because a lot of these customers end up being partners for me, right? I might sell to a big OEM, but then the OEM and I are going to partner together and we're going to go after the end users, right? Because you got to to your point, orchestrate that entire ecosystem. So for me, one of the very first things that I did was I started a partner accelerator network. And the whole intention behind that is how do we all work together in a way that the end customers really win? And then we share knowledge amongst them, right? We try and help ensure that what we're learning doesn't just stay with us, because if I can't help my customers be successful, then I'm not going to be successful either, candidly. Um, and then on top of that, we built a developer community that was all designed around how do you meet developers where they are, right? Because it's not just the customers, right? You can build this beautiful, amazing box, but similarly to the silicon, if the software doesn't land on it and really showcase what's capable inside of that system, doesn't matter. So we've spent a really big set of resources, plugging into developer ecosystems, right? Hugging Face and Ultralytics and some of the biggest names for models so that the developers don't change anything,
Yeah.
right? And if you can, again, pull all of those pieces together, because the only thing a developer really cares about is how many places their code can get and as fast as it can get there,
Yep.
right? So if you disrupt the development flow, that's that's kind of problematic. It's more difficult for them to want to work with you. So you gotta stick with where they're at, and then you have to land it on hardware that's optimized in a way that everything gets showcased,
Yeah.
right? So, long-winded way of saying you have to figure out how all of these pieces, what that end puzzle really needs to look like in solving your end customer's problem so you can put it all together in a way that really lands.
Yeah. I love that. And building community. It's amazing how even one of the challenges in B2B in particular is people are so busy on speeds and feeds and the hardware side, or if you will. But people buy people,
Yeah.
and then they love the product that and service that people deliver to them. And building community is what we work with a number of clients where we advise them and support them in doing that. Because building community is essential to have an enduring brand. And
Hmm.
in fact, it's ironic, and one of the great examples out there is Tableau. I mean, Tableau created a community infrastructure, and even had names for super users as black belts
Yeah.
and ninjas and so on. And those kinds of things are like really super cool to the community, and and the intel you get for that. I mean, so much of what Beyond the Brief is about is like, where do you get intel? And you've hit on a number of key areas. I'm curious, as a global person and somebody that spent a lot of time and effort out in meeting with customers where they are, what are some of the other things that you've run across culturally, or the insights that would have never occurred to you, or might have, but you had like a hunch that you've substantiated by being out there in the world? Are there any examples you'd care to share on that front?
The one that stands out, and it should be common knowledge, but I'll admit that when I was at, a bigger company, I don't think we thought about it as much as we should have. English is not universal,
Yeah.
right? And you cannot underestimate the power of having, even if it's outsourced, a local team. Right, and a local team talking to, not only the community that's within that country, but in a language that's spoken there. I had one major customer tell me that the only reason I was still sitting in the room with them was because I had a local team that could speak Korean with them,
Yeah.
right? They had kicked out a number of, other players, I'll say it that way, because they just didn't think that way. They didn't
Yeah.
understand the culture, they didn't understand the customs, and that's, again, it should be common knowledge, but I think especially as companies grow larger, we forget that there's all of these other languages that people think in first, right? I mean, think
Yeah.
about Indonesia, right? Indonesia's got just under 300 million people. It's one of the
Mm.
largest countries on the planet,
Yep.
17,000 islands, so it's crazy disperse, right? They speak Bahasa. If you try and advertise in English in Indonesia, nobody cares.
Right.
They just don't care.
Yeah.
Um, but I used to joke that, a lot of folks didn't even understand how to spell Bahasa, let alone how to market in it, right? And I think this becomes so front and center when you have the opportunity to travel and live in other places, because you
Mm.
just realize that, yes, three major languages across the globe are, English, Chinese, and Spanish, but even that's not enough,
Right.
right? And thankfully, there's some new tools that are helping get closer. Um, but I think people need to always remember Chevy's sad story of trying to sell the Nova
Yeah.
in Mexico, right? That
Yep.
translates into it doesn't go. And I
Yeah.
think that mentality of really understanding who you're talking to and where they are really matters.
Yeah. I had a hard lesson along those lines early on. I worked on the Jeep and Chrysler business in actually, I managed the
Okay.
Middle East, South Africa, and Latin America. And a particular word meant one thing in one country and a completely not good thing in another country, and it was all Spanish. And I was like,
Mm,
"Wait a minute." And, I often at career days or in strategy discussions and talking about human nature, ask people to think about how many declinations there are in a language. And like, what is a declination? I don't even know what that is. Like, okay, so the context of like how you might say hi from me, hi from us, hi from them, hi from the organization, like,
mhm.
and if a language has like, I lived and worked in Poland for 3 years in the early 90s, and 9 declinations. So I was, the newbie saying to the security guard as I left late at night every night, "Good night from all of us." And thankfully, somebody heard me do it and was like, "You aren't with all of us," so made me think of that differently. But
Mhm.
with that, there are lessons around. I mean, in Asia versus the Middle East versus in South America versus in Canada, yes, no, and maybe mean different things even.
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
so are there examples of that you've experienced? Are those kinds of things that are particularly nuanced in the world that you work in today?
For sure, right? You end up in one country and they say yes, and it actually means no. Um, or they say no, but it actually means, well, we're going to think about it. So yeah, I mean, I can't underscore how important it is to spend some time studying that local market. I mean, I'll
Yeah,
be honest, I have not entered all of the markets, even where I'm selling from a marketing perspective, because I don't yet have that localization element dialed in a way that I'm really comfortable with it. One of my biggest deals is in a country that I don't do any specific marketing for yet.
yeah,
I mean, that's a good sign for the company, but it also just means like there's areas of opportunity there for sure.
yeah,
Um, and I think asking for help is probably one of the biggest things that, especially in tech, we don't always want to do because we want to prove that we're the smartest people in the room. But the best way to gain trust is to say, "Hey, I don't actually know if this is right. What do you think?"
yeah.
And I think that's a really big lesson that a lot of people need to be reminded of, especially in the day and age where you can go to ChatGPT or Claude or one of these big LLMs and translate it. But if you don't understand the culture or their context, to your point, you might be translating it
Yeah,
officially correctly,
yeah,
but actually be sending the entirely wrong message.
yeah. Yeah, I'll never forget being in a meeting in Singapore as well. It was a regional meeting, so there were folks from across Asia Pacific, and thinking that the meeting had gone phenomenally well because I got lots of yeses from people, only to find out afterwards that one of the much more experienced people that I was with led me to understand what it really meant, and it wasn't terrible news, but it was hard and valuable news. Um, well, let's dive into Axelera. Like, what specifically are you solving for today, and what's around the corner? Because you talked about seeing one of your strengths is seeing around the corner. What are you building towards? Is it the quantum era? Is what's the thing that you're solving for next?
Yeah, so our whole company's premise is that inference is going to be 80 plus percent of the compute workloads going in time, right? So, just in case, right? There's kind of two sides of AI. There's training the model, which is how are you building something that is going to then be able to do analysis.
Mhm.
Inference is the analysis side of that model, right? So we focus solely on inference. And we focus on inference that is in a constrained environment. So, what do I mean by that? I mean that we started at the edge in very low power consumption because our premise, and Fabrizio, our CEO and co founder, his belief was there's nothing on the market that is solving for low power, high performance. But with the massive spike in data, you're not going to want to send all of the data from the video feeds, the communications back to a data center because that just adds complexity, it adds cost, it adds security risks. So we intentionally started at the edge because, and you know this being in this industry for so long, we've never once seen a company successfully take as kind of big compute and scale it down to the edge. But if you can solve at in small compute, right, in a constrained environment, you can take that architecture and scale up. So that's exactly what we did. Our first product actually runs on about 4 watts, kind of spikes up into the 8, 9 range, but I can do thousands of frames per second on that single chip. because we've re-architected how people think about compute, right? It's called digital in-memory compute. So you put the memory right next to the compute, so it speeds up how fast you can do that analysis. So to your question on kind of that seeing around the corner and why am I so excited about this is if you look across the globe, the amount of data being generated today is exponentially higher than it was even a year ago,
Yep.
right? I mean, if you go back 10 to 20 years, it's not even on the same chart, right? Now you're talking about logarithmic charts and all the
Right.
mathematical stuff that I have thankfully forgotten. Um, but that means if you can process it at the edge and figure out what actually matters, what signals do you have to send, then you can dramatically streamline or even stop data transmission back to a cloud or a centralized data center. Um, and with things like privacy and security concerns, a lot of times we don't even have to send the data anywhere else. I
Yeah.
can, if you're doing access control in your office, you don't want those spaces stored somewhere else necessarily. You want it locally to your office so that your personal information doesn't need to go anywhere else, but I can still get in and out of my office space.
Yeah.
Now you can do that, right? Those solutions didn't exist before. So then that product came out about little over a year ago. We're about to release our second product line that will scale up, right? Takes the same architecture, but gives you 5x the throughput because we've been able to, continue to optimize it, continue to, obviously add more cores, shrink the process technology, et cetera, to where now you can do like far edge with our first product and then what we started to call near edge, but think of it like if you're at a football stadium and you want to run security across all of the 8K cameras, you're going to have some sort of security kind of command center inside of the stadium.
Yep.
Like that would be kind of the near edge, excuse me, that kind of idea. And then we've got a roadmap that'll take us into HPC.
Mm.
So,
Nice.
although very, very optimized on inference and this belief that you don't have to have gigawatts of power to run
Mm.
your inference infrastructure.
So, how clearly does the industry understand inference, like as a premise?
I think it depends on what part of the industry you're talking about.
Mm.
Um, there are some parts, as in industrial manufacturing. I think they've adopted this really quite effectively
Mm.
because you could do predictive maintenance, you could do quality control on factory lines. You could understand what's happening with your machines. They adopted it actually pretty quickly and pretty early. Medical, I think, understands what inference is and the capabilities of it. It's just taking longer to roll out because of all of the regulatory requirements
Yeah.
that go in with that. And then there's other places that understand it but don't realize they understand it. And what I mean by that is, kind of going back to this, AI is really a tool that can underpin all workloads in the future.
Mhm.
They look at it as I need productivity gains on my database or in my ERP, or I want better understanding of my customer database. So they see the opportunities. They may not necessarily equate that you're adding AI functionality into those workloads,
Mhm.
but they understand what the output is. So it's varying levels depending upon where you are in the adoption curve. But I don't think there's any confusion around the productivity possibilities across the stack.
Got it. So from a marketing perspective, um, I could see the potential for things to get super technical really quickly. But
Mhm.
what's the lay person's kind of emotive, kind of visceral statement that is your brand? And how does that how have you made that relevant and resonant globally?
So admittedly, I think that it boils down to one really simple thing, right? It's how do you make money or save money? So depending upon which industry we're talking to, because we try and speak in industry language, because that's again to what they care about, not what I care about.
Yep.
In retail, 2% of the top line goes to shrinkage, right? So it's really a matter of we can help you protect your inventory investment by understanding what's happening on on your shop floors. Um, in agriculture, which has admittedly adopted faster than I expected them to, it was a scarcity
Mm.
conversation, right? They don't have enough workers to go sort effectively and quickly potatoes versus rocks. And admittedly, I did not understand how big a problem this was. But they look similar, right?
Right, right.
Especially when you first pull them out of the ground and they're covered in dirt. We can do that with AI, and we can do that really fast. So
Mm,
companies, across Europe, in Asia, are doing that for potatoes and tomatoes and even pills now, where it's really fast, and it allows these companies to make money faster because they can get to their end product faster. So it goes back to what we started talking about earlier, Chris, is it's about talking about my brand, about Axelera with this inference efficiency, but in a way that actually translates to their biggest business needs.
yeah. One of the things we think a lot about is, and you've said it a number of times very clearly, which I appreciate, is that AI is a tool. But the challenge a lot of times is people try to use it like a knife or something they already have, only they think it's better, faster, which in some ways that obviously performs. But the better question is what's possible and how do I build process around what's possible and to allow the AI to actually do its full potential versus so the we refer to them the beautiful questions have to be different, right? You have
Mhm.
to the how does somebody even know that it's a rock potato question, right? If you're a
Yeah.
farmer, you know that's the question, but would you even know that this is something that can be solved with the technology that's out there? So you kind of have a rock potato problem here. I mean, uh, to play the pun out fully, but how do you help people understand that? And is that a problem you're seeing that people are trying to use it like a proxy, a better version of what they already do versus something that's a novel application that helps them see a whole different way of doing something?
It kinda depends on the customer a little bit, and I hate to do a wishy-washy, it depends answer. Um, but in some scenarios, if you can get the customer, the partner to sit down, and you don't start with technology. You start with the, "Hey, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing this week?" Or, "What are the biggest things, biggest hurdles you have that are preventing you from hitting your revenue numbers, this year?" And you start it there. Then you can start to back into the, okay, what is the technology that might be able to solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to outcome-based approaches, right? In fact, one of the things that I try and do with our partners is teach them how to have that conversation,
Mm,
because a lot of times, right, we come from a world where speeds and feeds was fine, right? The
yeah.
next CPU, it's like it's 20% more performant. You're just going to get all that gains.
Yep. Moore's law. Yep.
Exactly. In the world of AI, that's not the case. And unfortunately, companies that approach it that way tend to get stuck at a POC phase and they never go into full deployment. The companies that get to full deployment and see the biggest return on their AI investment are the ones that have started with a problem statement in mind,
Yeah.
because then you're actually right sizing the infrastructure and you're building for what you want your outcome to be. And I
Right.
realize, again, it sounds like no Delex. Like, obviously, that's the answer, but that's not how this industry has worked for a
Yeah.
really long time. So we're having to retrain sellers. We're having to train, CIOs, CTOs to think differently about how they have this conversation. Because even at the end user level, there's a mandate from the board or from the executive team. We need AI. We've got to use AI to do what?
Right. Right.
Right? Really, to do what?
Mm,
What are we trying to make easier, better, faster for our employees or for our customers, right?
mhm.
And if you start there, then it's a much easier conversation and candidly much more successful outcome than if you just start on the tech.
Yeah. McKinsey published a piece fairly recently about the failure rate for AI application, and it's because the people are doing it, they don't have the problem statement clear, or they're using a grammar checker to do probabilistic analysis. Like, that's not this, it's a wrong solution, right? Um,
Yep.
yeah. So as you think of where you were last year, I mean, the pace of change in this industry you're in, and even the way that geopolitical issues are, and local political issues around data centers and power usage and all those things, you have a much more complex, problem set to deal with as a marketer. What's changed for
Mhm.
you last year to as you look around the corner that's coming up?
Um, I don't actually look at the industry as changing that dramatically. You're right in that there are knobs that are turning that I can't control,
Right.
right? So I try and focus in on the what can I control and how are we helping customers think differently. So we've absolutely, pivoted a couple messages here and there, but the core of who we are and what we do has stayed the same. What I will tell you, and this might be interesting for some of your folks too, what really has changed are the tools we're using internally to then make that come forward, right? On any given day, my team members use, I bet, 6 different AI tools.
Yeah.
Um, and that's great, but it's also like there are days where I'm convinced that I haven't been able to do enough because I'm trying to learn this new tool that just came out, which means I haven't used this other tool. Like it ends up being this constant, you feel like you're on a hamster wheel trying to constantly stay up.
Mhm.
Um, and every 3 weeks there's something brand new,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you kind of get into this like AI brain fog. I heard it described last week as not fatigue. I'm gonna blank on exactly what they called it, but basically this idea that you're getting burnt out
Yeah.
because there's so many different AI tools that you have in front of you. So we've kind of gotten into a pretty good swing, and I'll say it's really been over the last 3 to 4 months. Of okay, we use tool X to do brainstorming. We use tool Y that we've trained really extensively on our narrative, on our brand architecture, et cetera, on all of the products to do kind of first draft copy.
Mhm.
And then we've got a couple of other tools that we'll use after that. And I feel like we're in a decent flow right now, but I'm constantly, looking at understanding, okay, do I need to tweak that? Do I need to bring something else in?
Yeah.
Do I want to just build my own tool because now I can vibe code anything I want,
Right.
right? So
Are you
that's the hardest part, right? The industry's not the technology is changing really rapidly, but the
Yeah.
problem statements we're trying to solve for aren't changing that fast.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. Potato farming is been around forever, right? And the problem is it's how can you and there are solutions already, but how can you do it 10x better? And that's definitely
That's right.
the opportunity. Um, the, I'm curious. You mentioned a number of tools. Are you using synthetic personas at all?
We've dabbled with it, but candidly not a ton yet.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that is we still are using human expertise
Yeah.
in terms of how do you have those conversations that really land on the so what. It's a little too egotistical in the responses right at the moment, and that's just not who we are as a company, and that's not how I want us to be portrayed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really great point. And I think the AI slop that's out there, you can tell when people are using it and the human in the
Mhm.
loop is either lazy or not effective, right?
Right?
It just shows up. Having a big dash between every other sentence is your clue number one, right? Like, okay,
I know.
delete,
Which but that's so sad because I write with M dashes. So
yeah,
and now
right.
all of a sudden my writing, my, very personal from the heart writing now looks like it's
Same,
AI.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom is relieved. She's an educator, and she forever has told me, "Stop doing that. That's terrible." I'm like, "Okay, all right, I will." So, yeah.
She feels vindicated.
That's right. She's like, "See, even AI is they're telling you it's bad." That's funny. So Alexis, any big things coming up that you want to like call out that are like in the horizon for the organization?
Oh, we've got some great news coming later this summer. I'll hold off on it for right now, but yeah,
Okay.
I'm very excited about the rest of this year.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear what that is. We'll definitely stay in touch, and we'll have to have you back after the fact to spread the good word.
Yeah,
Um, so,
would love to.
Alexis, you've had an amazing career up to now. You're only, I mean, much more to come, I'm sure. But based on what you've done to date, Hollywood called and wants to do a biopic on you. What's the name of the film? Who's going to play you, or what's the plot or theme?
Oh, all right. So I do have a name. I'm not sure who plays me yet. But I've always kind of kicked around this idea of writing a book, and I think the title is Dumb Enough to Say Yes. Because if I look back over my career, I think if I had known by the time I was done with something what it would have been, I might not have said yes,
Yeah,
or maybe halfway through. But I'm so grateful I did. My biggest adventures, the scariest moments, the things that pushed me the most as an individual, as a colleague, as a friend, are the ones I was dumb enough to say yes to.
I love that. Yeah. I can relate to that in that when I went to do my initial check-in on an international assignment, when I landed back in the US, I called my parents and said, "There's no way I'm doing that. No way I'm doing that." And what did I do? The next day I went to the office and said, "I can't wait to get started."
Good
And
for you. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
and, took it was completely outside my comfort zone, and but it was in retrospect, it was amazing. Not simple, not easy, but that taught me so much, and I cherish the
mhm,
experience, but I think that is a derivative story of probably what you're relating to, is if you had known, you wouldn't have done it, but in the end, it's probably made you stronger and given you so much in
for
so
sure.
many ways that you wouldn't have known otherwise.
Without question. I
That's
really do credit the folks that were kind enough to, give me the opportunity to say yes.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that your movie title is like counterintuitive, and it's well thought. It absolutely it leads. I want to see that film. I definitely want to see that film because I like there's a story in there that's going to be really rich. So I love that. Um, well, as we wrap up here, I just want to, Alexis, thank you so much for all you shared. This has been fantastic. We could go on for hours. We won't this time. We will have to have you back. Thank you so much for all that you shared with our listeners. Are going to be absolutely excited. We will in the when we promote this, we'll actually make sure your LinkedIn profile is out there so people can reach out if
Yeah.
they want to connect. Any closing remarks or thoughts that you want to end with?
Maybe just to stay curious. And I know that that's something that's been around forever, but in today's day and age with the quick changes of the tools and how fast everything's kind of dancing around us, staying curious is the best path to being successful, in my opinion, because it means that we're not locked in to what used to be. And I think that's going to be the difference between those that really thrive in the next wave of crazy
Yeah.
and those that get stuck.
I love that. I'll link that to a statement you made earlier that was advice somebody gave you, that 2 ears, 1 mouth,
That's
and
right.
great connection point to being curious, right? Use those ears, they're there for a reason.
Yes,
Awesome.
they are.
Awesome. Oh, Alexis, thank you again so much. Appreciate it. Can't wait to our next conversation. And with that, we will wrap up another episode of Beyond the Brief, and stay tuned because there's always more.
Thank